I had no idea, and arguably still have no idea how to run a nonprofit. I know a little bit more than I did yesterday. So if this farm kid from Idaho can start something that now is international, I'm telling you right now, anybody can.
Luke, welcome to the show.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. This is one I've been looking forward to for a long time because your story and what you do is so cool. It's so wild. It's such an interesting path. And I almost can't, it's almost too good to believe. I can't believe it's a real thing.
Oh, wow, thank you. Yeah, I still don't believe it.
Yeah, and let's get into it. So, for the uninitiated, for those who don't know, who are you and what do you do?
You bet. So yes, my name is Luke Mickelson. I tell everybody, look, I'm just a small farm kid from Idaho, and that's really sums it up. I grew up in a very small town, and 3,000 people, and being in a small town and being even remotely athletic, you have to play all the sports. So I was a big sports guy in high school and did all the leadership, the student body leadership, things of that nature. And you kind of get forced into it if you have any sort of ability that way. But I loved small town life. I got to know everybody. I knew every single person in my high school, and even after high school. We have I have very close friends because we were very close in high school, being such a small town, and working on a farm. I think it helped me uh, enjoy and have a desire to love to work with people. And I think that's one of the big things I have, and how a little bit how SHP started was the joy of just working with other people. And what I do now, which is a far cry from what I originally started out doing, is yeah, I founded Sleep in Heavenly Peace back in 2012, and our main objective and mission statement is no kid sleeps on the floor in our town, and we just want to make our town everybody's town. And this is such a huge problem that no one knows about. I didn't know about, but once it's been unshoveled or unearthed, and you see what the problem is and how bad the problem is, I just, me and now thousands of others just couldn't help ourselves but to jump in and get it fixed.
All right. What exactly does Sleep in Heavenly Peace do?
So we're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, and
Mhm.
our purpose is to build beds, twin size beds that can be made into bunk beds, from raw wood, and deliver them to children ages 3 to 17. And we do that, completing our other mission, which is to bring communities together to solve this community problem. And so we build bunk beds or beds from raw material, with community involvement, volunteers, some people that have never touched a tool in their life. They come together, and we build beds and deliver them.
Heck yeah. So, you're the founder of this thing. So, take us all the way back to the beginning. How did you even get the idea of helping someone like this, let alone starting a not for profit?
It's strange as I look back. 2012 is a long time ago. And in my own life, I had a job. I was working as an outside salesman and got promoted all the way to vice president of sales, and was actually going to be part of the purchase of the company I was working with, when I stumbled across this family in my community, that I had heard had kids sleeping on the floor. Now, at the time, I was pretty much what they call a youth pastor. In the South, the position was called young men's president. I was basically in charge of the young men's program, where we would on Wednesday evenings we'd figure out some activities to do, and it was basically Boy Scouts is what we did. And when I heard about this problem, I told the executive leaders there. I said, "Hey, you know what? I think me and the boys will take care of this bed thing. I want kids to be involved with helping other kids. I think it'd be a great thing." And I don't know if you've ever been around 12, 13-year-old Boy Scouts to get them excited about anything other than screens nowadays is it's a feat, let's call it that. And so I gathered them together and I said, "Hey, what can we do? What do you want to do here? We've got, looks like we got some kids on the floor." And they had some fun ideas. It was actually pretty surprising how interactive they were about it. Well, let's go buy them a bed. I think we can get some things donated. And I don't know. I just felt like there's more to it here. And this idea popped in my head. I said, what a great opportunity to get an Xbox controller out of these boys' hands, and let's put a drill and a sander, and let's teach them how to build something. And I just got done doing some construction in my house, and I've never built furniture before in my life. I wouldn't call myself, a craftsman by any means. But I thought, we can figure something out, and they liked that idea. So I went home that day and saw my daughter had a bunk bed she was sleeping on, and so I just patterned it after that. Made a few changes to make it a little easier for these boys. And then about 3 or 4 nights that week, the boys came over and we cut, drilled, screwed, sanded, and stained this bunk bed for this family. And I saw a couple of things that was interesting. They were excited about it. These 12-year-old to 15-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids were just excited about it, and they had a good time. I mean, and keep in mind, this is in the first week of December in the middle of Idaho. It's not exactly warm outside, and I'm in my garage, which is not heated. So it wasn't that most ideal situation, but they had a lot of fun. And the time came that we were going to deliver this bed. Now, I didn't get a chance to go on deliveries. I did it in my garage, so I had to clean up my garage afterwards. But the boys and the parents and the other leaders went to this house and delivered this bed. And the next day, I just heard all the amazing stories. The family, the parents, the boys just shared their experience, and it was awesome. It was great to hear. I was bummed I didn't get to see it. And I went home that night, and I remember I was in this life crisis, if you will. I don't know. I was 35 ish, something like that. I had this little faith crisis going on, not knowing exactly who I am or what I should believe in, and what my good guy, I don't know. I just you have these moments in life, especially when you kind of question your faith. That I knew I was a good guy. I felt like I was a good guy. I'd like to volunteer. I was helping the kids out. I coached all my kids and other kids, but I just had this hole in my stomach. And when I built those beds for those kids with the help of the Boy Scouts, I don't know. It kind of felt like it filled it a little bit. And so I was sitting on the couch. My kids were pretty young. My oldest was at the time 10 years old, and he was kind of complaining about the toys that, yeah, I'm not going to get you another Xbox. I'm not going to get you, these toys. And especially coming off this experience where these kids not only didn't have toys, they didn't even have a bed to sleep in. I don't know. I got up off the couch and I started heading to the garage. And, I remember people going, my family was like, where are you going? I said, you know what? I'm going out in the garage. I got leftover wood. I'm going to build another bunk bed and you're going to help me. And again, for the next couple of 3 nights, I just had a great time with my kids. We built another bunk bed, but not knowing what to do with it because I didn't know this was a thing. I just wanted to have the experience with my kids, and I probably figured I could find someone. I didn't know where to find it, so my wife said, "Well, why don't you post it on Facebook?" And my first thought was, "Okay, post a free item on Facebook. I'm going to get all sorts of people banging down my door." And although I did get some of that, what I got, which was really shocking, was how many people, friends, people I didn't even know, strangers, said, "Hey, that's awesome. How can I help? What do you need?" And it just dawned on me, like, I was really surprised by that there were so many people out there that really wanted to help. And, later on, I learned just how big of a help that is. So I did finally find a family. I call it my Haley story, where, Haley and her mom had been living in a car since she was born, 6 years old, never had a bed. And friend of mine that I was working with, Tennille Claridge, had worked with some social services and got them a house, right? So they finally had a place to sleep. at least room. And I said, great, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted another child that we could bring a bed to that didn't have one. But when I walked into this home, now I've seen homelessness before, but I really never have seen it or thought to see it through the eyes of a 6-year-old. And so when I walked in this home, first of all, there was nothing in the house. The only thing in the house was a hot plate resting on a milk carton, and it had a can of soup on it. That was it. No table, no chairs or TV or anything like that. So that was shocking. And the other shocking thing was this 6-year-old girl, how excited she was to show me her room, because she actually finally had a room. So we walked into this room. She had no idea why we were there. And you can imagine what it looked like, holes in the carpet and on the walls and secondhand toys in the closet. And I don't think the closet had a door, if I recall. But what caught my eye was in the corner, and there was a nest of clothes there. And it was very apparent that's exactly what it was. She slept on those clothes. I was overcome with emotion. It was very emotional. And me and my buddy, Jordan Allen, we started bringing pieces of this bed in. And you could see at first she was kind of puzzled by it. But then as we started putting these pieces together, as we do, she just erupted. She just started hugging us and, hugging the bed, kissing the bed. And I'd never seen that before. It was just amazing to see her reaction. And we got all done. We started bringing in the mattresses and the sheet sets. And I remember the mom going, "Oh my gosh, you're bringing a mattress and sheets?" And I said, "Well, of course, she's got to sleep tonight." And the mom just lost it. Kind of sorry. It gets me every time. I was raised by a single mom too. And so to know the struggle that that poor woman went through and thought about for 6 years, and protection for her daughter and safety and all this, I could just see it in the tears that were pouring down her face. That and the experience that Haley gave me, of delivering that bed to them, just changed my heart instantly, filled it full. And I remember it was about a half-hour drive home, and me and my friend Jordan were driving home. We really didn't even say anything to each other. It was just that respectful, that of the experience that we just had. And finally, when we got about to the house, I remember thinking, you know what? No kid in my town is going to be sleeping on the floor. That was our mission or our motto, and which turned into our mission statement. And I knew right then I'm going to do whatever I can. And so we kind of adopted this as a family Christmas project. At that time we went to Lowe's, which is one of our number one sponsors, and said, "Hey, this is how much money I've got. What can I do?" And once we told them what we did, Lowe's was great. They said, 50% off anything you buy. So we were able to do 22 beds that holiday. It was my Christmas fund, right? My kids didn't get near as many presents, but we had a lot of fun delivering these beds to these kids. Still, no idea how big this problem was. And as the more we asked, or the more we showed what we were doing, the more applications, the more interest, from the community to come in and help solve this problem. And I remember going, there's something here. There's something here. And I mean, building beds, I never thought of that before. Funny story. I remember my wife at the time said, "Well, you got to call it this. You got to call it something, right?" And I said, "Well, how about beds for babes? That sounds good." And I tell everybody, it's not a good Google search. Yeah, we'll cancel that. Yeah, that
Yeah,
went about as far as that. So,
whoosh,
Christmas
man.
time.
That's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
close call, but
Dodged a bullet there. She said, "Well, what about sleep in heavenly peace?" And it was just perfect. It was one of those moments where it's exactly what we wanted to say and what we wanted to leave, and it had a little bit of Christmas time, because it was Christmas time hooked to it, and so that's what we called it. And it quickly evolved. Obviously, the acronym SHP is now three letters that are very dear to me, and many other people, and so we started building beds, and each year it was just a Christmas project. Keep in mind, my buddy Jordan that came down, he started wanting to do up in Boise, which was about 2 hours away. So one day in December I'd build down here. The next weekend I'd go up and build up there, and we deliver all the beds. And it was just awesome. But what was interesting is the more we built and the more we showed people, the more applications and the more volunteers came in. Pretty soon, more sponsors wanted to come in, and we weren't a nonprofit. We were just a Christmas project. So we thought, well,
and how many years was this from the first bed?
so 2012 was the first bed, and 2012 and 2013 were the 2 years. All the way through 13, we were starting to get these big these big opportunities, at least monetary opportunities, because these companies wanted to support us. So we became a nonprofit the end of 2014.
So it was 2 years from when you made your first bed to becoming a proper not-for-profit. It was two
About two and a
years,
half years. Yep.
two
Yeah.
and a half years.
And so now we were a nonprofit, which just really meant nothing more than, we could take these donations from people that needed the tax write-off, which is great, and but still, we had no concept. I had no idea how big the problem was, nor had any aspirations of being some big, huge nonprofit, right? I still had a full-time job, and we were still, living life. So being in 2015, we just got so many more applications and volunteers that we decided, okay, maybe this is a little bit more than just a Christmas project, right? And I remember we were sitting in a restaurant. Jordan and I were sitting in a restaurant. We were talking about this coming bill that we had coming up, and the strangest thing happened. This is when this I would tell people this is when I knew that there was a lot more, and this was a lot bigger than just us and our two little towns. But we were talking about this build and helping kids and how amazing it was. And this lady came up next to us from I don't know where she came from, but she says, "I'm sorry, but I just listened to your whole conversation. Here's all the money in my wallet." I mean, total stranger. And I just was like, you got to be kidding me. Like it just touched her that much. And that's I guess that was what we were realizing. Not only did it change our hearts, but it was changing the hearts of so many people when they heard about, especially a problem they've never heard about. So we started doing a lot more builds during the year instead of just on Christmas time. So that 2015, we did 15 builds in one year instead of just one. So we're getting more beds. We're learning how to build them better. We're getting more connected and more known, if you will. Which it was hard to keep up with all the applications. Pretty soon that we were just getting way more applications than we were able to build fast enough because we both had full time jobs. And then in about 2017, we had other friends that lived in other states had been watching us for several years now, wanting to do the same thing in their own hometown. So we started putting on what we called chapters of this nonprofit and kind of organized a way to bring them on as chapters and teach them what we're doing. I'm helping get, the system down. And so in the end of 2017, we had 9 chapters scattered across the country. Most of were family or friends. Some of them were people that had just kind of Googled how to build a bed. And there we were, and we taught them how to do it. And, we were building beds. But it was a real critical time for me because at that time, we were now traveling to other states and helping other people out. And I was using all of my vacation time to do this. And my employer at the time, keep in mind, I'm working, I'm going to be buying this business with a partner. And a lot of my time, especially brain power, was dedicated to SHP and not the organization. And I had to make a choice. I couldn't do both. And although the choice was already made, there was no question I was going to keep going with Sleep and Emily Peace. It just filled my soul more than anything. It was still a hard choice, but that's what we ended up doing. So I quit my job in November of 2017 and went all in with this charity thing that we've been going and doing for 7 6 7 years. And at that time, we had just been videoed by a Facebook watch series called Returning the Favor, whose host is Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs Mike Rowe guy. And we knew that was going to be pretty big. Although it didn't bring a lot of donations in, what it did do is pretty much announce to the country what we're doing and how we want other people to do this. And from then we got like 5,000 new chapter requests. It was crazy. Now we didn't put all those on, but we knew it was coming, and we put together a pretty quick training program, which is far better now than it's ever been. And we started training chapters. So now we have trained 354 chapter presidents, and we're in 4 countries, and we build our goal this year is just over 50,000 beds for the year.
So I got a question that through that whole story was sticking in my mind. Why you?
Wow.
So, and what I mean by that is I walk out my door, I walk 10 feet, I'm going to see poverty. We have so much in North America, but on the flip side, there is such intense disparity and such intense poverty. It's very easy in North America to turn a blind eye. Very easy. So why did you step into the breach?
Never been asked that question. The why. That's first of all, I always liked service. I always tell people, look, if you want true joy, just stop looking at yourself. Go help someone out.
Mhm.
Your problems don't go away. They just don't seem near as bad, right? And I think that's one of the big joys that come from service perspective on your own problems. And for me, I think it was just a perfect storm. I go back and it's really difficult to explain unless maybe you've been through a faith crisis, especially when you just don't you grew up one way for 35 years and I was a missionary and I was all in. I just didn't feel it like I was in the right place. I just didn't feel like I was in the path that I should be in. Not that that path was a bad one. I just didn't feel like it was full for me, and I'd been feeling like that for a while. And then all of a sudden, here's this service project. And keep in mind, I did a lot with the Boy Scouts. We built
Mhm.
wheelchair ramps and mowed lawns, and we did all sorts of other service projects that were great and they were fun. But it was something about building a bed, something about seeing those kids' joy. And then when I saw delivering a bed to a child that's never had one. And it's one of those things that when you hear about it and maybe even see it on a video or something like that, it's touching. But to be there, the spirit, the emotions that you feel when you're a part of that, it instantly changed me. And so why me? It could have been anybody. It can be anybody. That's the message I like to share. I did a TED talk about passion and purpose, and it was really telling people or encouraging people just act on your tiny moments. We all have these moments where it's you walk by, I don't know, your neighbor's trash can's tipped over. I should go
Mhm.
do that. I should go pick that up. Just take the tiny moments to do that. Now, maybe nothing comes of it. Maybe nobody sees it, you know, but you just never know. And you don't do it for anything other than you just want to help people because
Mhm.
that's the feeling that really drives you. That's the passion that keeps you going. And I think when people lose that passion, and I've seen it even within SHP, we've had chapter presidents that were, I mean, they die for SHP. And all of a sudden they're not part of SHP anymore. I think they lose their passion and their focus. It becomes something different. So you have to kind of be careful with that. But for me, it was just a perfect storm. That was a long answer to that question, but I'm certainly glad I guess it was me.
Yeah. Well, the why is important because everybody can do it, but not everyone does do it. And I understand. I don't help every person I see. There's a big difference between recognizing you can make a difference and then putting yourself out there and actually doing it. I think part of it is also when you get into helping others, especially people who are living in very difficult situations, recognizing the depth of the problem and having to bring that into your reality. So with that, you'd mentioned before, you were familiar with, homelessness and the challenges of people who are living in poverty. But what do you now know about poverty and homelessness that you had not known before you went down this path?
Very, very simple question that it can happen to anybody. Granted, we just help one small portion, which is beds for kids,
Mhm.
and that doesn't always classify someone as being in poverty.
Mhm.
But we have seen situations where mom and dad have great jobs, they live in a nice house, it burns to the ground, dad loses their job, they have to move, there's a death, there's, some disability, an accident. The life can change on a dime. And what this person was one of those guys or one of those families that love to help other people are now the ones that need help. And so to see those situations be created and be involved with the side of the coin where they're in need, right? And realizing that can happen to anybody, I have learned and have appreciated and feel like I'm far less judgmental of those people that live in those situations. Too many times do we walk in and you see someone, well, he's a bum on the street or he's in poverty because of his own choices, right? And there's some truth to that, right? But behind those choices, there's always other reasons. A lot of times, those choices, the person that was making those choices really didn't have very good choices to start out with. right? And that's what we hope to provide these kids is at least a little bit of a leg up, whether it's not just a good night's sleep. We know we provide more than just a good night's sleep. The confidence they have, the moods and the ability to learn more because they have a good night's sleep. We hope that gives them a leg up. So when they are faced with these difficult situations, there's much better options, And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think I've learned to appreciate and be less judgmental of the situations that people are in because you just don't know their story.
Yeah, I juxtapose it to, are you familiar with low barrier housing or zero barrier housing?
I'm not. Huh?
I live in Vancouver, and there's massive crisis about homes. Like the cost of a home has gone far beyond what just most people can afford. But also just renting apartments, throw COVID in there. Although we actually have quite good mental health and addiction services, we don't have enough resources. The resources we have are excellent, but we don't have enough to serve the population. So there's a ton of homelessness, both from addiction, mental health, just poverty. Low barrier housing is about the idea of like most housing has like a lot of high barriers. Like, it's like you got to have rent, you got to have social insurance card, you got to have an address, you have to have a job, you have to have all these things. Low barrier housing would be basically, it's like we're going to remove as many barriers as we can because the foundational idea is for people to build the kind of lives that they optimally want to have and not how I think they should have it, but the kind of life they want to have it. So it's not like a judgment of society, you need to have this kind of house or life. But if people want to build the life that they want to have, one of the key foundations they need to have is a home, somewhere they can lay their head at night. That's low barrier housing. Zero barrier housing is like housing that's provided. For example, if someone was involved in sex work, they could have Johns come up to their room. You could be not sober and living in a house like that. There's a clear agreement that essentially we are not going to come from a place of judgment that will be preventing you from having a home. Because, for example, someone who's like street entrenched and living on the street, for us to say, you can live here as long as you don't do this thing that you've taken on as a lifestyle because you already live in the street. And we decide that you're not allowed to do that if you live here. That's a barrier. So zero barrier housing would be like whatever you're doing essentially up to and including a certain point, you can live here. And I think low barrier and zero barrier housing is some of the bravest, hardest work that people can do because you see a lot of stuff involved in that. And I would say I would juxtapose to that because like being focused on supporting kids' wellness is wonderful. And of course, it sounds wonderful, it is wonderful. But also there's a lot of emotional labor involved in that because you got to see kids who are in very vulnerable situations.
We tell everybody, well, chapter presidents when when they come to training, we said, look, there's two major problems being a part of SHP and being a chapter president. Number one, it's extremely addictive. It's
Mhm.
so much fun. It's so fulfilling. I've had a lot of people that have dedicated their lives, in other nonprofits, whether it's soup kitchens or building homes or whatnot. They just love it. They just love to serve. Many of them, and they've come up to me and said, "This project is the most fulfilling I've ever been a part of." And we hear that a lot. And we actually train chapter presidents. Look, you still have a life. You still have families. You got work, possibly. You can't do this 24/7. It's not healthy for you. So make sure you have a balanced life. And the second hardest thing, which probably actually even more harder than the first one, is sitting in bed and these chapter presidents receive the applications that are within their boundaries and reading these applications and the stories of what these kids are living in and the conditions, and you're in your nice comfortable bed with your storage unit full of 50 beds and you just can't deliver them fast enough, or you're deciding whether, okay, I've got one bed here, I've got a family that's got, three kids that are about to go into foster care if they don't have a bed, or I got a family over here that's got three kids whose parents just died and they're living with grandma and they're on dirt floors. I mean, those are the situations that some of these poor chapter presidents have to decide which one to do. It's extremely emotional. And we've actually had some volunteers go on a delivery, come back and say, I'm sorry, I can't deliver beds to kids. I'll build them, but I can't deliver them. It's too overwhelming. And it is, it can be anyways. When you look at when you look at homelessness in the eyes of a child, it's different. They're in their situations not because of their choices, and that's
Mhm.
different from the parent, right? So it's hard to see that. It's like the starfish, there might be thousands and thousands on the beach, but if you pick up one and throw it in the ocean, you made the difference in at least that guy. And that's what we try to encourage is you focus so much on the big screen, or the big picture of it, it can be overwhelming. Just focus on what you can do now,
Mhm.
because that's really what's most important. And the reason why we wanted to expand and get more chapters all over America, all over Canada as well. Our mission statement is no kid sleeps on the floor in our town. It says our town, not my town, not your town. It's our town because we want everybody to be able to say the same thing, and it's solved by the community. Yeah, there's some challenges there. There's some emotions that are hard to overcome, and we tell people, look, we don't really care about the parents, the situation, why they're there. I tell people, look, I don't care if the parents got $1 million in the closet. If they don't want to get their kid off the floor and that kid's sleeping on the floor, then I'll bring them a bed. And I don't know. Is that enabling? I don't care for that argument. I just care that, whichever way you want to draw the picture, the kid's on the floor. Let's get them a bed if we can.
Yeah, I think when genuinely trying to help, the desire to place judgment and barriers on things, so it's like, well, if not this, then this, like any of these things, it's like, oh, like any kind of puritanical moralistic view that you're saying, like you have to fit in this little bucket to be able to get our my help or our services. I think it's kind of a ridiculous way of going about things. Like going into a scenario of just saying like, hey, I don't care what the situation is, like we gotta get this kid to bed. Great. That's the focus.
I
So
think
I,
it's
I
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, please go ahead.
I think it's almost laziness or
Mhm,
procrastination in our part sometimes.
Like we talked about earlier, we walk by problems all the time, and
mhm,
oh, I could go do that, but it really is not going to make that much of a difference. You really don't know. You don't know.
mhm,
If anything, just go do it because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's missed out on some people. I think some people, if it's not something that's going to be life changing, then they don't, at least for the person they're doing, or maybe even for themselves, whatever. But if it's not life changing, then it's probably not worth doing. And you know what? Sometimes it's the little things that you think aren't life changing, aren't a big deal, don't make a big dent, are the most meaningful.
Totally. And like going back to the idea about enabling, I think that's such a like a weak argument. We can wax philosophical. It's like, oh, we might be enabling someone, but it's like, listen, you can stand on that like kind of fake moral high ground if you want. But the same thing, it's like if I think of low barrier housing or zero barrier housing, it's like I think the most important thing we can do to people is try and like level the playing field of human experience. We'll try and like, if we live in a society with so much and there are people who are in such challenging positions, why wouldn't you try and level the playing field? Don't worry about enabling. Everyone has different life experiences. It's way easier to say that's enabling when you haven't walked in somebody's shoes. I think that like providing someone with a home with no judgments or a bed with no judgments on their family, that's one of the most important things you can do from a starting place of leveling the field of that human experience. And it's just like intellectual laziness for me to be in that kind of space. I think it's a harder flex to be like, I have to leave my judgments behind and really stay on mission here of helping people.
Absolutely. And as chapter presidents have come
Back
back,
or give me a call or whatnot and say, you know what, I just went on this delivery and I walked in, the house was bigger than mine. They had a big screen bigger than the TV I have. I mean, you could tell where this conversation's going, right? And I'd say, look, don't go into that house caring what the parents have. Go into that house thinking what the kid has. And undoubtedly or inevitably, I'll get a call back saying, thank you for that, because this is where it helps us, when you look at things through the eyes of a child, and that's your concern, at least for us, right? Getting beds to these kids, it almost forces you not to be judgmental. You can't be judgmental, because if you did, it would be a really bad, or what we call a hard delivery. Where, I mean, we've walked in with, I'm bringing a bed to their two kids, and parents didn't even get off the couch. They're, oh, just in the back room. And man, I remember thinking to myself, well, gosh dang it, you lazy bones. Why don't you come help me? I'm bringing a bed for your kid. But and you just got to push those thoughts out and remember, I'm not here for the parent. I'm here for the child. And it does help quite a bit with that prejudgment that you might have on the family. And I think for me over time, it's just knocked off those rough edges. And now, I mean, I'll walk in here to North Carolina, I'll walk into a really, really rough trailer park, and listen to this woman's story of her addictions, her relationships that she's been with, and cry on her shoulder with her because I'm there for the kids, and these kids need a good mom. These kids need a good dad. They need to have a parent that they that support them. And 99% of the time, the parent is there for the kid. You really are able to leave your judgments at the door when you start focusing on what we're there for.
And that it's a human desire to judge. Like, I'm not saying I'm not going to judge. Like, you know, I'm like as snarky as the next person, maybe like a higher level. But like when it comes to helping other people should be about other people. Should be about, like you said, think about what the kid doesn't have rather than what the parents have, or think about what this person really needs. If we allow our judgments to get in there, it's this kind of weird, sneaky human ego thing where we start making it about us. Well, I don't feel good about this, so this isn't a good thing. Where it's like, well, wait a second, that's not the mission. Um, let's go back to something you said earlier, though. I'm real curious about. You talked a bit about how you've like lost chapter presidents or people have like moved in and out of the organization because they lose their passion for it or they get burnt out. And you know, a thing that is, I think, really well known in not for profits and any kind of like community based work where you're really like helping others is that idea of getting burnt out, you know, like getting kind of compassion fatigue or not being able to look something that's serious in the eye and not flinch like that. And that sometimes just the desire of being like, I just want to focus on my own life and not worry about other people. How do you keep the greater organization focused on taking care of the people that are volunteering their time and making sure that they're getting the support they can so they can really show up and do the best they can for the community?
Great question. And, it's very easy for us to answer that mainly because we have seen that as SHP's grown. Remember in 2017, 2018, when the whole Mike Rowe episode aired and we started getting all these new applications for new chapters coming in, man, we were just excited to get, I mean, if you fogged a mirror up, you almost became a chapter president. We did very little vetting. You want to be a chapter, great, and come to Twin Falls and we'll teach you. And then we send them home, and we didn't have near the support from, let's call it our chapter support center, our headquarters, if you will, that we do now. But, if you were a chapter or a person that wanted to, you come in, you start chapter, you're back home. And it's interesting. We look at the numbers now of 354 chapter presidents that we've trained. There's really only about 290 active. So you look at that 60 or so that we've lost. Well, over half, a good probably 45 of those 60 were all in that 2018, early 2019 class. And what we learned, and when we learned this very quickly, not too far past that, we learned that now to become a chapter president, we won't take anybody that does it alone. We require that you have to have a core team. And that is no question the number one success of a chapter in SHP is a solid core team, because you don't have the burnout. What's the saying? Many hands make light work, right? You can spread that wealth out. And the chapter presidents that we have lost, a good portion of them, it wasn't so much burnout. I think some of it was, but a lot of it is they just they're so passionate about it that they just want to control it. And it's hard to accept someone else's failures. You give them a job and they fail at it, or maybe not fail at it, but didn't do it exactly how you wanted to do it. You pull it back. Well, now you just pull that opportunity for that person to feel passionate, just like you do. And those chapter presidents that do that ultimately either fail or quit because they're overwhelmed or they just get too frustrated. And really, we don't make a perfect bed. There's flaws on it left and right. Holes don't line up all the time. They're a sound, solid bed, but we don't make fine furniture. And we like that because you know what? It's all about the uniqueness of volunteers, people that may have never touched a screw or a drill and put this bed together. and it's perfect in its imperfections. And I think we got people out there that they can be perfect in their imperfections, and we got to allow them to do it, allow them to grow. And so, the culture that we've had here at SHP, and we wanted it from the beginning, is a family. We wanted people to feel like you're this is more than just, although a nonprofit and a for-profit, really the only difference is you don't pay taxes, but we know the difference is the feeling that these people are coming into our organization with, and we want them to have that family feeling. So we call it SHP family. We're having our first national convention. It's called the Family Reunion, for crying out loud. So we feel like it's important to recognize, look, you can't do it yourself. You got a team, you got a family behind you, and you need to go find more family locally to help you grow.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that idea that, you don't necessarily need to be like skilled with tools or have any experience with them, because that's like the ultimate easy way to get into helping is like, oh, you don't have to have any skills, just show up. You show up, we'll help you out, you'll figure it out, we'll go along. So it's like the almost instantly deployable, because you have like essentially a product that you're providing. You have a system of how it's done, and it requires no skill to do it. We'll teach you the skills. That's like a recipe for success in terms of helping people. I want to ask you two questions though, that relate to what you're just saying. The first is culture. So, when people talk to me about culture, I always kind of laugh. It's like when people talk to me about strategy, like, and the worst is when people say culture eats strategy for breakfast, because I just want to jump out a window. Like, please stop saying that. Because like strategy is this term that word that people use all the time. And it's like, you get a sense that they've said something profound, but like 8 times out of 10, it's like they're just saying a word that sounds good, but they don't really know what it means. A whole bunch of stuff to everyone in the room, and then nothing at the same time. Culture is another one. When people talk about like, oh, our culture, the culture, if you ask like 3 or 4 questions, maybe even two, suddenly the person's like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Culture is like it's an important discussion, and it's important to like, culture happens whether or not you do something or not. Like culture is always going to happen, right? And it's good to be intentional about culture, but what are you talking about when you talk about culture? So, and then what are you going to do about it? So I know this organization has grown very much organically for a long time, and then now you're more intentional about its growth. But how are you intentional about the culture? Because you have many, many chapters. You're not just a national organization, you're an international organization. So how have you defined the culture? And then how do you help replicate that culture in different places?
It's very difficult, especially even in the States. You have the North, you have the South, you've got the East. These are all different, even different cultures within our country here, of views. And SHP itself, we have very, very religious people that are part of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, and some that aren't at all. To bring these different cultures together, even different religions, different political views, to bring those types of people and their views together. Um, I, I go back to say that the most important thing we do, or we try to do anyways, is maintain the pureness of our mission. Let me give you an example. So we've had a few chapter presidents, very religious, have come into the organization because they believe God sent them, and I 100% believe that they have that passion that their higher power gave them, and so they want to share that with others. So we've had chapters write scriptures on the slats of the bed, or delivered Bibles, or pictures of whoever, the people they believe in, and we've had to shut that down. and it to the pain of some. However, because we have the culture of helping children, and the pureness of that is the simple, I don't care what religion you are, I don't care what political views are, we're just here to help kids. I think that's really helped us stay on course of keeping a a a focus of our mission, which is to help kids with beds. And now we're able to, as we bring people in, we always talk about, as a family, this is what we do. It's really interesting we talk about this today because just recently we've put on more board members. And some board members have never touched a bed or never built a bed or delivered a bed at all. They've been in other nonprofits and they've seen how the other nonprofits work. And being, I was the executive director to work with the board and these board members to help them understand, okay, you've been with SHP for 6 months. I know you came from another nonprofit, but before you make some of these decisions, please try to understand the culture that we have. And we talk about this in our leadership meetings almost every time, of how important and how valuable our culture really is, because it is centered around helping people. It's centered around focusing on the kids. And the minute we walk away from that, and we've even had some chapter presidents leave because they gravitate away from the culture. And really, culture, what I mean by that is the focus of the mission. They gravitate away from that, and ultimately they leave. When I was a CNN hero back in 2018, and being a CNN hero, there was 10 of us. We got to go to California to be a part of Alchemy Annenberg, something like that. It's nonprofit training, world-class nonprofit training. This is back, I mean, still, I didn't know what a nonprofit, how to run one, but so training, I'd soak up any training we could get. But one thing that really stood out amongst all the great things I learned there was what's called mission creep. They showed a scale where a nonprofit will start from an idea, it'll grow, it'll gain momentum, start being more efficient, and then they start bringing more people in. And as they bring more people in, that brings in more ideas, and then they start accepting doing these other ideas, and then the nonprofit either stagnates or it falls apart. And the reason why is because of mission creep. They start losing focus of the original reason why they're there. And I think that's part of culture, right? Is our culture is helping kids. Our culture is not providing them desks or bringing air conditioning units in them or whatnot. It's this, and to keep that same focus. It's not easy. It's there's sometimes it's very hard. You have to let people go, or you have to say no. But to keep that culture is really a big thing for us, to make sure that we're staying on course, we're staying with our mission, and protecting the pureness of and transparency of what we do.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, keeping it super super simple. So like even if we go to like kind of recovery work, like 12-step work, so right, you got 12 steps. That's it. And meetings can kind of have different ways they function. Sometimes it's like you're in a circle talking, sometimes you have a speaker, like all these different things. But the idea stays the same. But you add human beings into anything, and like groups of human beings, and people get excited, they want to try new things. Part of why 12-step programming has been so useful and it's so successful with addiction work is because it's like, no, keep it simple, keep it right here. And I love that people get excited and they want to do new things, they want to help. But it's like, listen, if you got a formula that works, the best way to do it is keep it as simple as possible, as community-based as possible, as person-to-person as possible. And don't create these really complex, wild systems or overreaches in there.
Oh my gosh, if you knew those words out of your mouth, what they mean to us. I got chapter presidents going to be listening to this right now, just laughing. I have senior team just laughing. Keep in mind, so we build beds and we build them in kind of an assembly line, right? So we have a strategic way of doing this, a specific way of doing this, specific jigs that we use and tools that we use. When you bring other people in, just think about all these carpenters right here, and they're amazing. Engineers are like the worst. They come in and oh, you know what? You could build these beds so much faster if you did this, and they'd be more accurate. This, blah blah blah, and they're absolutely right. But they miss the point. The point isn't trying to build a most perfect bed. It's not what it is, and it's not trying to build it the fastest or the most efficient. In fact, if you look at our process, it's quite inefficient. And it's designed that way because the inefficiency requires what? More hands and more volunteers. And that's the key. If you're a nonprofit out there and you want to grow your nonprofit, you need to get as many people involved and hands-on, quote, quote, of what you're doing, because those are the mouthpieces that share your mission. When we have build days, there are 50, 100, sometimes 500 people that come and build beds. And every time they go away, some of them are like, that was the funnest activity I've ever done. We do these big events for Lowe's charity events. And I mean, Lowe's charity the foundation's been doing events for years, great, awesome events. Well, they picked us the last 2 years. We've had people come up and say that was the funnest Lowe's event I've ever done. And that's the key, is getting these volunteers hands-on, involved, feeling the satisfaction and the fulfillment that we've felt, have them feel it too. And that comes from that comes from inefficiencies that we have in our build process, but we enjoy them. And we have ideas. Chapters have come up with some really amazing ideas that we've had to very kindly and lovingly, the best way we can, say that's a great idea, but we can't use it. It eliminates too many volunteers, or a number of different reasons. But yeah, it's funny you say that, because it was probably the hardest thing at the very beginning when we started blowing up, and all these chapter presidents came in and just started throwing ideas left and right. What if we did this? And what if we did this? And we still have a little bit of that, but we've had to really come down hard the first couple of years there when we blew up, that yeah, this is the way we do it. We got to stick with it.
Totally. I also want to just pop back to when you're talking about people who want to bring in their philosophy, their personal philosophy, whether it's spiritual or whatever it is. I'm not a person of faith, but by all means, anyone who has a person of faith, it's totally, I respect people's right to express themselves in that way. My mom lives with us, and she's very involved in the church. She's Catholic, like I was raised Catholic, but I'm just not spiritual. But going back to 12-step, if we think of, and we're talking about that concept of barriers earlier, one of the barriers that keeps a lot of people that maybe are curious about recovery, keeps them out of AA or NA or 12-step work, is that idea. It's like, oh, it's about God. It's a religious thing. That idea, you used the term earlier, higher power. And your higher power does not have to be like a God or of any kind, of any religion. It could be whatever you feel your higher power is. But even explaining that to someone, you can see it's just like removing a barrier from them. Like, for someone who wants to be sober, it's like, I want to be sober, but joining this group, I have like a moral barrier to doing that because I'm not religious, or I feel like I'm not religious and I won't be accepted. It's like, oh, it's not about religion, just higher power. Higher power is a term. But what's interesting is it started with a religious streak, like the idea of God. And over time, they're like, we want this to help as many people as we can. Let's just repurpose this from being about God to a higher power. That is, to me, a brilliant move. And by the way, anyone listening, I'm not out here trying to sell everyone and getting into 12-step work. It's just like conceptually, it connects to what you're saying. Keeping it simple doesn't just mean the work that we're doing is simple. It means it's philosophically simple as well. It's intellectually simple. It's just, we are doing this thing to help children have beds. That's it. And keeping politics out of it, keeping like spiritual leanings out of it, any of these things, that's not about excluding people. In fact, I feel that's about including as many people and removing barriers to the service.
You ask me why me. Honestly, and I've probably never shared this before. Gosh dang it. Dang you. One of the big reasons why SHP hit so hard to me was because having a faith crisis. I mean, I was in a faith that was pretty strict, and required a lot of time. And when you leave that faith, or you have doubt of that faith, you're not a bad person, but like, I think like many other religions, you're kind of taught that you're being misled, right? We've heard that term a lot. And here I was, what I thought was a good guy. I serviced the community as best I could. I was helping Boy Scouts. I was coaching. I felt like a good guy. So why am I going through this? Like, what is this reason? Now, we can philosophize on reasons all day long, but what I can tell you is, now, because of that faith crisis I went through, I am far more accepting and understanding of other people's beliefs, religious or not, right? I don't want to use the word tolerant, because that's bad, just more loving towards them. And had SHP been started by someone that was extremely religious in their faith, it may not have had the same result simply because I tell people, I don't care where you came from or what got you here. The fact that you're here is it. And like I said, we have a podcast called Humans Helping Humans because that is the effort. That is really the focus of what I wanted to people to know and want them to know is we're just humans and we're helping other humans. Where that help comes from for you, what inspired you to do that, awesome, good for you. But we're just humans helping humans. And I really look at this faith crisis I went through back in 2012. Well, for 5 years before that too, as just almost like a prep for me to be more willing, more accepting, more loving of someone that wasn't my faith or maybe even believed completely opposite me, especially with politics, completely opposite, and I think that is, for lack of a better term, that's one reason why maybe I was selected.
Hi, man, and thank you for sharing that because I know it can be tough to unpack those things. I'm a firm believer that not all, but a lot of greatness comes from those moments of deep uncertainty, deep reflection, deep suffering, deep pain. And I can say certainly, going through a very difficult time at one point in my life, like multiple years of a very very challenging time in my life. I'm a better man, better person, better partner, better father. I've done greater things. My ideas of what I can do and why I can't and why I should or can do it totally focused now. Just different thing. Having those moments of crisis can unlock something that's within you that might always stay hidden away if you weren't tested.
I think challenges pop up in different people's lives at any given moment. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I'm far from perfect. I've made challenges, or I've made my life a challenge for myself, and made poor choices. And things come along when they come along, and I think you can make the best of them. And some of those choices, like some of the people that we service with beds, you put yourself in a situation where you can make choices and the choices aren't that great, you know.
Yeah.
But you just do your best. Sleep in heavenly peace has been a huge focus in my life for the last 11 years. It's both helped a marriage and hurt a marriage. It's both helped my relationship with my kids and probably hurt my relationship with my kids. I mean, there's pros and cons all over the place. You just hope that doing the right thing, and building beds for kids, I don't care what you believe or who you are, that's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I think it's going to wash out. My mom always said, cream rises to the top. Sometimes it's in the middle, and you
Yeah.
need to stir it a little bit, but it eventually rises to the top. So I'd like to think you're right. Our challenges in life, they can either make you or break you. If you could dwell on them, which will probably break you, or you can just remember them as a chance to learn. So
Since you opened it up, starting anything, so like Cadence, like my business, I started on my own, just me, a notebook, cell phone, the dire warnings of my parents ringing in my ears, like don't start your own business, and also some good advice from like clients and friends. I know starting that business, it was a huge pull. And not only was it a huge pull, like people around me didn't understand it. And it's not they didn't understand starting your own business, they just don't understand what I do. So it's this like sense of being totally on your own, like just totally on your own, just doing something and kind of doing it like you have to put all of your energy into it. And I worked so hard for so many years that it limits your relationships. I put less time into my relationships, like my uh, all of my different relationships, my family relationships, my friendships, and all that, because I was so focused on making this thing happen. Now, at the end of the day, it's my company, and I live off the company, and it's been worth it. But there's a lot of sacrifice for you. You started this thing, and you just started it kind of like by mistake. You didn't have any intent of it becoming a thing, but it has required you put yourself all the way out there. You leave your career, you go all in, which has been a joy. But I'm certain there's been some sacrifices you've had to make. So what can you tell us about that?
Any success requires some level of sacrifice.
Sacrifice. And if it didn't come, then it's on its way. I started in a period of my life, like I mentioned, of a faith crisis, and my life was great. I mean, I was married, I had 3 kids, I had a good job, I was making a good salary, my retirement was set. I was going to buy this multi-million-dollar company. There wasn't one thing about my life that if you sat there and looked at it, you would think I would complain about it. It was just it was great. And I knew that. And I think for several years, I fought that. I fought this. Why do I feel this way? Why, because I have such a great life. But when SHP hit, and it hit me so hard emotionally and the fulfillment, I knew that there just wasn't anything else I wanted to do. You're talking to a guy that loves to fish, talking to a guy that loves sports. I mean, Saturday college football in America I loved it. I mean, I'd go to the Boise State games, go Broncos. I'd go to I'd go to as many games as I can. But I kid you not, when I delivered that first bed, that I couldn't care less about a football game on Saturday. I would much rather be in the shop with my friends building beds or delivering beds than watching a football game. I mean, we've watched some football games, but I haven't watched a college football game at home on Saturday by myself for years. I haven't fished near as much. I used to go 3 or 4 times a week. I went, I think, 3 or 4 times the last 2 years. It just is not a satisfying, fulfilling feeling like it is now. So that's all great things. But you're right. It does, that passion and focus that now has fell on me and developed in me at first, especially at home. My wife was all in it. And it started out very small, but as it grew and grew and grew, and especially when Mike Rowe and that hit, it was taking a lot of my time anyways, but that was nothing compared to what it did when all of this hit. And I knew the importance of it. And not that it was the reason, but I always tell people, look, Sleep in Heavenly Peace, when I started it, probably saved my marriage for a while. And then it was part of it was the reason why it didn't last. And I was married to a great woman. She still is amazing person. It's just that focus that sometimes is required. I couldn't tell you, Aram, just to be honest, whether it's right or wrong to keep a family together, if it was even going to be able to be together or not. To I don't know, to maybe go on a hunting trip or a fishing trip with your son rather than taking him to build beds. I don't know. It's hard to look back and think what would have been better. You just do the best you can, and all I can do is look back and say, you know what, I've made mistakes, but I also think I've had some good successes, and I'm just going to do the best I can. And building beds where SHP is right now, I can't even think about the scenario where SHP didn't get created. We've delivered or at least built almost 160,000 beds. That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kids for anybody to think about, and it would be horror to think that that didn't happen had I not created SHP. So I think the sacrifices are very hard, but the rewards are very good too.
Sticking with that idea of I'm going to make mistakes. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm just doing the best that I can. If we dovetail that into your leadership, so again, you didn't intend to start this like huge thing, right? So you've had to scale up your leadership chops fast and into very complex situations like that have to do with all sorts of things while also keeping the mission very simple. So what are the mistakes you've made as a leader as you've gone along, and what have you learned from them?
Wow, let me air my dirty laundry, huh?
Oh, please,
I'm just kidding. Yeah. Why not? We're close, right? There's a lot of mistakes, and some of them have been great. In fact, as SHP's kind of grown really rapidly the last couple of years. I've had some people, a lot of people call. I want to talk about, hey, I'm starting a nonprofit, or my nonprofit's just kind of blah. How did you do what you did? And really, at first, it's like, man, I don't know. I don't know how this grew, right?
Yeah.
I know a bunch of mistakes we made, right? But I also recognized some of the successes, and the what I call the potholes that were created, the potholes that we saw that we had to overcome has just made us stronger. So I think some of the challenges, when I started this, I wanted to be with friends, right? I wanted, and that's how it grew. Was most of these guys that were either part of leadership, or you want to call them a co-founders or on the board, they were all very close friends. Half of them, or most of them, were I graduated with, right? And so I leaned on them quite a bit, which was the best success, smartest thing that I've ever done. And some of the challenges that I have with me is I probably don't appreciate them as much as I should. And so, and leaders don't often, where you're so focused on something else. Sometimes you don't stop and share, and bask in the glory, if you will, of the success that you've had with others and what they've brought to the table. I've lost some friends because of that. People that were so hardcore SHP and wanted to grow with the organization. I just didn't have I don't know, the bandwidth or the attention to be able to share their successes with mine, and we've lost them. So I'm one of those managers, one of those leaders that, man, I'll hire you, I'll bring you on board, and I'm going to let you run it. I don't have time to micromanage. I'm a more forward thinker. My now executive director Jordan Allen, my buddy who delivered that first bed with me, he's more the practical guy. He like brings down to, okay, that's great, but we still got to do this. He's one of those guys. There was so much activity and so much things going on that as we brought these people on, I knew that I couldn't manage them the way that maybe I should have, I think. However, man, I want people, and I tell my chapter presidents this: give people a job and just let them do it. Let them fail. Let them work on their imperfections. I had no idea, and arguably still have no idea how to run a nonprofit. I know a little bit more than I did yesterday, but look at where we're at right now. So if this farm kid from Idaho can start something that now is international, and has helped hundreds of thousands of kids, I'm telling you right now, anybody can. And it takes humility. It takes realizing that, you know what, you're not the smartest guy in the room, and quite frankly, you don't want to be. Your ideas aren't always the best, and you don't want them to be. You know, other people come in with, and allow other people to come in and feel the passion of what you have, because their ideas are going to be great too. So I don't. I think I've known that. It's just more prevalent now as I've allowed that in my management style with SHP, to listen, to realize I'm not the genius here, and to allow other people's talents to take over. That's the only reason why SHP has grown to where it's as, or at least, the technology and the success of where we're at has come from on the backs of others, and that's a big success for me when I look at my management style, because I don't think it was always that way.
All right. So as we're getting close to the close of the interview, I'm going to ask you three questions that are going to be successively more difficult. And the last one's going to be real doozy. Now, before we get to that, I want to give you a space to do any shout outs you want. We're going to add all of the info on Sleep in Heavenly Peace and all the places where people can look it up. We'll put it in the episode bio. But beyond that, is there anything that you want to shout out, mention, anything that you want to bring up at all?
Our main goal, when we're on these podcasts or whatnot, is really, we just want to let people know, the awareness of what child bedlessness really is. Not a real word, but a real problem. It represents, at least in the States, 3% of the total population. It is a big problem. And those are statistics that aren't well put together. Those are ones that we've put together. None of us are statisticians, by the way. So it is a real big problem. And two, I want people to know that they can do something about it. You know, we're the largest bed building charity in the world. And that's not to brag. That's just because there's not very many. And what we knew is, if we held on to this idea and this program to be able to build beds to ourselves, then we wouldn't help as many kids. So we just really encourage people out there that if this is something that touches your heart and something that you want to be a part of, and maybe even dive in a little further and becoming a chapter, we encourage that. You can go to our website and learn how to become a chapter, because really it's a local problem. It needs to be solved by the local community, and be that person that can solve that problem. I don't care about money right now. I don't care your donations. We're just trying to find those people that are touched, and can start a chapter.
All right, you ready for your first question?
Fire away.
Throughout this whole process, starting this thing, scaling it up, developing as a leader, what's one thing that you've learned about yourself that you might not have figured out had you not gone down this path? So, what's a piece of information, something you now know about who you are as a person that you wouldn't have figured out otherwise?
I've learned um, a lot of shortcomings I have. I've mentioned, I learned that I probably don't appreciate people like I should, and I'm working on that. I'm learning the value of humility. I've been successful my whole life, both in and out of sports, in and out of business, and realizing that, again, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. My idea that I held on so tightly can be altered by other smarter ideas, and that's healthy. And so I've learned to be a lot more relaxed with that, a lot more humble with those ideas that might contradict or go against what I originally put together, because it's important that it's not about me. It's not about this program that I put together. It's about the program that we, as collectively the SHP family, is working on and solving, and it's really about the mission. And so, yeah, I think that's probably one of the things I learned the most is I had a lot to grow there, and although I'm not where I want to be, I know what I've got to work on.
All right. So, a lot of what you said ties into my second question. You've built something that is so clearly from your heart and that you care about, but you're the face of it, right?
Right, right.
So, at some point, you're maybe going to want to retire, but I'll say without like doomsaying here, we all have a certain amount of time on this earth. How does the organization continue without you?
It's a great question, and yeah, being the founder and the face of Sleep and Heavenly Peace has its pros and cons. I'll tell you a story that will answer this question, and it was probably the highlight of, at least a milestone that I was waiting for. When Sleep in Heavenly Peace blew up in 2018, is mostly because of the Returning the Favor episode, the CNN. I was on American Ninja Warrior. It all centered around the things that was on, right? The things that they'd heard or podcasts, whatnot. And I remember it was probably 2020, maybe 2021, when I went to our training. I've only missed two trainings the whole time, for the last 4 years. I went to a training, and I went up to what we call an NCR, a new chapter request, and introduced myself. And the lady looked at me and she says, "Oh, great. So how are you involved with the Sleep and Heavenly Peace?" She had no idea who I was. And I honestly, I know this sounds like a line. It's not. It almost brought tear to my eyes, because right then and there I knew, okay, finally, this isn't about me. This isn't grown because of me. This person isn't here because they were inspired by Luke Mickelson. They were inspired by the mission. And our team, my team, the SHP's family has brought SHP to the point where it really is emphasizing the mission and not the man. And that's where we're at. I mean, and now there's a number of chapters that have come to training that they may have heard of my name, but they don't know who I am. They've never seen anything. They're there because they want to be for the kids. And when I die tomorrow, gosh, not tomorrow, my wife will kill me if she heard me say that. Tomorrow is in,
I'm sorry I asked.
no kidding. Yeah. I need to go to 12 step, I guess. No. Um, it's going to be well taken care of. And we have a succession plan for every position in SHP, and that's very comforting to know.
Last question. It is a world of need. If I walk out my door, I go, if I walk for 5 minutes, I'm going to see not one person in need, many, many, many people in need. And not only that, the houses that I pass between now and then, I don't know what's going on in those houses, what the situations people are in. There is so much surfaced and unsurfaced suffering, pain, challenges, all of these things. And it can be just too much. You know, it's easier to look at a screen, bury yourself in there. It's easier to binge watch, easier to go to a college football game. And none of these things are bad at all. But it's easy to allow that to desensitize you or to take up too much of your time. So any words of advice for people who are right at the brink, where they've got hope, they've got intention, but they haven't bridged it to action yet? Any words of advice for people who dare to hope that they could make a difference, but they haven't found the ability or the willingness or that energy to get into action?
If I can inspire, and that's what I hope to do with these podcasts, that's what I hope to do from the very beginning. If I could ever inspire or anybody find inspiration to just do something, take that little step, that little moment. I think some people focus on, like I said, the big picture, like the grandiose idea, and it's too monumentous to take a step. I mean, if you had told me, 12 years ago or 10, 11 years ago that, hey, you need to build 50,000 beds a year, I'd have went, okay, yeah, I'll go back to fishing.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Right. But if you're like, hey, why don't you spend a couple hours, this week and build a bed for one child, let that passion that you have start small. And it's okay that it starts small. And quite frankly, it needs to. It's beneficial. Jordan and I talk a lot that these chapter presidents come in and they already have money, they already have tools, they've got all these luxuries that we look at each other and like, man, that would have been nice. But honestly, it is those small steps at the beginning, and I'm talking small steps at the beginning, that have allowed us to not just appreciate what we have today, but to be able to endure some of the tough times. If you're out there and you have a passion for something, I don't care what it is, right? Don't focus in on saving the world. Just focus in on saving one. And that one, as it grows, will turn into two, which will turn into four. And I'm telling you right now, 11 years later, you're helping thousands and thousands of people. We've had over 300,000 volunteers in the last 3 years. 300,000 volunteers, 160,000 beds. These are monumentous numbers, that would have shied me away back in the day. But it's the small steps, it's the tiny moments that really matter and should matter and should be there. So, focus small, aim small, and then allow it to grow.
Heck yeah. This has been the coolest conversation, man. So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me on.
Heck yeah. Any last words before we're closing off?
No, appreciate your time. Appreciate this conversation. I've been on a lot of these, and this is a memorable one. I promise you. Thanks for sharing our story, and I hope that it inspires others to help. We're humans helping humans, and I hope you find another human to help.
All right, everyone. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this. Get out there, start something, join something, make a difference. My name is Aram and this is One Step Beyond. Mike, drop the beat.
One step